The last question I have for you is, what has been your most profound moment as an attorney so far?
My most profound moment as an attorney has to be actually the case I've been working on today. So I'm working on a civil case today for a client that I represented in his criminal case, and his criminal case is what I'm referring to. This young man was charged in 3 robberies, charged with in 3 separate cases with punishable by life offenses, none of which he committed. And his grandmother called me last year, and she said, "Listen, my grandson didn't do this. I know. If my grandson did it, I would not have called you. I wouldn't be about to spend a lot of money to pay you if my grandson did this." Um, and I knew just from speaking to her that he didn't do it. And so when I pulled up the case and I read over the case, I knew from reading the reports he didn't do it. And so it was so glaringly obvious to me from before I ever represented him. I had never met him. But I knew that this was wrong. Just a little background on this story. The first robbery that he was accused of, he was literally just walking home. And someone about 30 minutes earlier had been robbed in an adjacent neighborhood off one of the roads that he was walking on, and said, "Black male wearing dark clothing robbed me." Police searched and searched and searched for 30 minutes. At some point, my client walks into the area, and he's a black male wearing dark clothing. And so they stop him. There's no indications. The police admitted in depositions on the stand, there was no indication whatsoever that he was doing anything wrong. They searched him. He didn't have anything that indicated that he had robbed someone. They did a dog track. The dog track didn't come anywhere near where he was, although the police reports kind of made it sound like they did. And so he was arrested for that. And as a result, his photo was put in several photo lineups for robberies that were committed after he bonded out in the area. 2 other people, both of whom had been robbed, both of whom had said they did not see their assailant's face, picked him out of photo lineups. And so he was then charged with those robberies, even though other than them picking him out after admitting that they had not gotten good looks at the person who actually robbed them, he was then arrested for those robberies and put in jail with no bond, because by being accused of a new crime, he violated his bond and his old one, even though he had done nothing. And so the first time I met him, he was in jail, and he had been in jail maybe about 2 weeks at that point. And he was in so much despair, but he also had so much hope because he knew he hadn't done anything. And he was a quiet and very stoic guy, really didn't say much. But in talking to him, I knew he didn't do anything. He was utterly confused. It weighed on me so heavily because I could tell there were certain things he could give me information about, but the second 2 robberies, he was like, "I literally do not know. I didn't know that these robberies even happened." And so in that sense, he couldn't really assist me in representing him in those cases because he literally didn't know what happened. And so immediately, I investigated the case before I got any information from the state. We got records from the police department before the state attorney's office even had them, and we started investigating immediately. Within about 3 weeks of them hiring me, I contacted the state and I was like, "Look, he didn't do it. I can prove it." And I start just sending him information. I'm like, listen, I'm sending you I think I did like a 9-page memo that I sent to him with all the factors and why, he just couldn't prove his case and why he should immediately drop the case. And his response was, "Well, this is a really serious case. I'm not going to drop it." And I was so not surprised at all, but disheartened because I couldn't understand logically what the seriousness of the charge had to do with whether or not he was guilty. And so long story short, long story long, we spent 6 months fighting. He spent 6 months incarcerated in jail, being locked down 23 hours a day, being told what to do, not having any real access to his family, his friends, any support system, watching his mental health deteriorate, watching him have to put on a mask because the place where he was not safe to his physical, emotional, or mental well-being, and having to trust me, having to trust God, having to trust that the situation that he's in every day for 6 months is not going to be the situation that the state is promising. Because even after his DNA came back in one of the robberies as being excluded, meaning that he could not have been the assailant, the state offered him 10 years in prison. And so honestly, that just made me angry. That put more fuel to my fire, and I was enough was enough. Enough had already been enough for months. And you know, all of the things that we have been working on were coming to bear anyway, and it was inevitable that we would be able to secure his freedom. And ultimately, we did. The judge excluded all of the evidence in the case where he was illegally stopped. The victim in one case where he was misidentified came into deposition and admitted that he was 0% sure that my client had actually assaulted him in any way, or that he had ever seen my client before. Mind you, we knew that. We knew that for months. We had interviewed the client and begged the witness, and we begged the state to do so, and to no avail. And so it's, I guess, in a way that it's sad that the case that I'm most proud of is the case that an innocent person had half a year of their life stolen from them. But in another way, I'm so proud that we secured his freedom. I'm so proud that I was able to fulfill the promise that I made to him, because I told him, if it's within my power, you are leaving this jail and you won't ever see it again. And to be able, and he actually went home, like I want to say, the day before his birthday, which was awesome. And to be able to see that he's fine, you know, I mean, he's traumatized, most certainly. But to be able to know that the work that we did and believing him when no one else did, and knowing that, like, all he was doing was walking. And we've heard that story so many times in this country. And I think, going back to a different interview we did, you asked, why do we do this? And I think that's why the case that that makes me most proud is one that something horrible happened to a good person, is because we've seen cases where it was so much worse. And we were able to mitigate that for him. And if it's within my power, you know who you are, we'll be giving you a lot of money in response to it. But you know, it's sad. It's sad in a lot of ways, but I open myself up to that burden because I want innocent men to go home.
Absolutely. So just to add on to this question, I wanted to ask you, what is your motto for your law firm?
Motto or model?
Motto.
Well, our slogan is bringing justice to you.
Okay, that's what I wanted to address, the slogan. And so, with you being passionate about this current situation and, you know, really feeling the despair that your client went through, would you say this brings joy to your justice? Like, in regards to, like, actually being happy that you're able to advocate and bring justice, which I know you've done time and time again, but because this was just so, you know, it touched your heart and it was heartfelt, would you consider this as joy to this justice that you promised to bring to your clients?
Joy is an interesting way to describe it. So in hindsight, it brings me joy, right? It brings me joy to know that I was able to fulfill the goal that I set, which was to help him, and that he is in a much better position because of that. But I think of that more as satisfaction. It's difficult for me to take pleasure in the procedure of the work, because it's difficult for me to watch humans treat other humans inhumanely. And so I cannot say that it brought me joy for 6 months to go back and forth with a prosecutor who I genuinely believe knew my client was innocent. And I can't say that I don't think he cared, which is such an interesting juxtaposition. I think he was just unwilling to sacrifice even an inch. He was unwilling to go beyond his normal procedure knowing that another human being was locked away in a cage who had done nothing to deserve it. So no, I can't say I take joy in having to question another person's humanity in that way.
Even after the fact, like
after the fact, I can say I take joy in that he is free.
Right.
I take joy when I can see him hold his head up.
Right.
I take joy. I'll have joy when he has children, when he finds a wife. I'll have joy when I see him walking around. He is vowed never to wear orange again. So when I see him a free man on the street, that brings me joy. When I think about the fact that he ever wasn't, no.
Okay. Thank you for that.
All right, you done made me cry. We're gonna end this interview.
Okay.
All right.
No, I'll be the same. My voice cracking. I want to cry.